Okay, so happy Tuesday. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we are going to talk about some things that I wrote down in this little book here, and that would be my application to the UK and Australia for medical school this year. And for those of you who don't know me, my name's Rahat, and I am a third-year human kinetics student at the University of Ottawa. And yeah, but before I do that, I'm going to go get some coffee. So because I just woke up and there was a lot of construction noise outside, so still a bit tired, but I will get back to you as soon as I get the coffee. And we have our coffee. Oh, that was really good. Anyways, so back to the matter at hand, which is this application. And a few weeks ago, as well as earlier today, I posted on my Instagram story asking anyone if they had any questions for me to just DM me or just reply to that story about the whole process. And anyways, so about the whole process, and if they had any questions, they could just ask me. So far, and if I get more questions, I can make a part two, but this is what I've been asked, and I'm also just going to talk about some pointers and useful resources that you may want to check out if you are also considering this pathway. But yeah, okay, so the first question was, do you need an undergraduate degree? And for those of you who don't know, in Canada and in North America in Canada, before you can get into things such as law school, med school, dental school, you need to complete a 4-year university degree. And for Australia and the UK, it differs because for some of the schools, you can apply directly from high school, and other schools, you have to wait until you've graduated, or you can do both. So you do not necessarily need to finish an undergraduate degree or even start one to apply to either country. And yeah, so then someone else asked, what are the requirements like? The requirements are somewhat similar to Canadian medical school or US medical school, where you do need decent grades. For some of the schools, they look at your MCAT or your medical college admissions test. Other schools look at a different exam, which I'm currently studying for, called the UCAT, which is the University Clinical Aptitude Test. And some schools just don't require either, such as James Cook University in Australia, which is where I'm applying this year. And another person asked me, if you want to be in the Canadian Armed Forces and do the MOTP, or the Medical Officer Training Plan, can you go to med school outside of Canada? So from my own research, I want to say no, in terms of you can't get your medical schooling paid for by the Canadian Armed Forces, which is part of the MOTP if you do medical school outside of Canada. However, if you were to do medical school outside of Canada and you did your residency either here or over there, and then you come back and you want to enlist in the forces and be a doctor, I do believe that's still possible. And if I'm wrong, I apologize. But from the research I've done and the doctors that I've talked to in the forces, they've all told me that in order to do the MOTP, which is where you get into medical school and then you enlist in the forces at the same time, you need to be going to medical school in Canada. And then someone else asked, what are the residency options like, and can you practice in Canada afterwards? So the short answer would be yes, you 100% can practice in Canada afterwards, and you can do residency in Canada, but there is a big caveat, which is when you are a Canadian citizen and you go to medical school abroad, so for example, in my case, ideally either the UK or Australia if I get in this year, uh, if I wanted to come back to Canada or the US for residency, I'd be considered an IMG or an international medical graduate, even though I'm a Canadian. So IMG spots are usually limited in terms of residency placements because the medical schools want to give those residency spots to Canadian students first and foremost. Uh, so it's a bit tricky at first if you're applying straight away, as in right after medical school you want to come back to Canada. It's a bit harder because it's a bit more competitive to get those spots depending on what you want to do. So for example, I want to be a surgeon and I want to go into like pediatric surgery or trauma surgery or possibly neurosurgery. If I wanted to come back to a surgical residency in Canada right after I graduate medical school, that would be harder than if I wanted to say do primary care or like family medicine or something like that. However, there are residency options for graduates of UK schools in the UK and Australian schools in Australia. So in Australia, you're considered an Australian medical graduate, even though you could be from a different country, so long as you graduate from an Australian medical school. Wow, I picked a bad day to do this. Anyway, so yeah, so in Australia, you're essentially treated like you're an Australian student who, so you have all the residency options available. And in the UK, what you do is a 2-year foundation program. So it's essentially like a 2-year internship, and that would be part of your student visa for studying in the UK. And after that, what you do is you apply to specialty training. So whether you want to do surgery, primary care, anesthesiology, whatever it is. And if you get into said specialty, then you would go on and finish that training. And then if you wanted to come back to Canada, say after you had already completed your residency, you could also do that. And for that, what you'd have to do is just pass a set of licensing exams, which are almost the exact same as what Canadian residents have to pass, except for 1 or 2 additional exams because you're still coming from abroad. And so yeah, those are all the questions I've gotten so far, other than why do I want to do it? And for that, it's a bit trickier. I mostly want to go to Australia because of their healthcare system and the emphasis that they put on Indigenous health, rural health, and just tropical like medicine and tropical healthcare, especially at James Cook, which is like their main focus. And that's just because I think that healthcare is a fundamental human right, and where you live and how much money you make per year should not determine the standard of care that you receive. And for anyone that doesn't know, I was born in Bangladesh, and then I moved to Canada when I was about 6, and I've lived in Toronto for most of my life. So I've seen the type of care that you get in a third world country or a developing country, as well as one of the biggest cities in Canada. And I've also had the privilege of like working at St. Michael's Hospital, which is like the biggest trauma center in the country. But so I've seen what like good care looks like in terms of having the financial resources to back up the doctors and the nurses and just the rest of the staff. And then I've also heard stories from friends who lived farther up north, or even just past Barrie, that people from up north, like in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut, they would get flown out to hospitals in Barrie or 2 hospitals in Ottawa to get their care just because there's not enough resources up there. And the way I see it is that that shouldn't be a thing. like we should be working towards bettering that and providing care to everyone at an equal level, rather than just, if you live in a city you can get really good healthcare, and then if you live up north you may have to travel 2 to 3 hours just to get like a specialist to look at you. So in my mind that just doesn't make sense. And as for the UK, it's I've always wanted to live in England since I was like 2. I've been there a couple times to visit my cousins, so just the country itself I love. And also I love their healthcare system because it's a universal healthcare system. So rather than some of it being like private for profit, a lot of it is paid for by the government and by taxpayer dollars, or pounds over there. So the fact that, again, like your financial state does not determine the level or quality of care that you get is very important to me personally. So that, as well as how well the NHS has responded to the coronavirus pandemic, because at one point the UK had the most cases in the world, and then they essentially just rallied, and all the healthcare workers were just able to bring those numbers down so quickly. And I find that just really admirable, and I would want to be part of something like that, where you're able to make a bigger impact. And also, just for me personally, I want to work with MSF or Doctors Without Borders, ideally. So in my mind, it doesn't necessarily matter where I go to medical school or where I'm living in the world, because part of like my day job would be to go to like crisis zones or just to provide humanitarian aid to various countries in need, such as like right now in Yemen, in like various parts of the Middle East, and various parts of Africa, South America, things like that. So in my mind, it doesn't necessarily matter where I'm living in the world, so long as I can be a doctor at the end of the day, because that's what I've always wanted to be. So yeah, those are just some of the reasons why I want to go there. There's definitely a lot more, but again, I could just make a part 2 of this video. And with regards to the resources that I've been using to both study for the UCAT as well as apply to these schools, with regards to Australia, it's this service called AUSTREC. They are amazing. The staff there is super helpful and super friendly. They just break everything down for you. I'll link their website in the description below. And all you need to do to get started is just figure out what programs you want to apply to, or what schools you're thinking of applying to, or if you're even thinking of going. You just send them a quick email, and then they just get back to you as soon as possible, and then just start the application process with you there. For the UK, it's been a bit more tricky, just because not every UK medical school, so out of the 31 of them, I forget off the top of my head how many allow international students to even apply. So over there, you're considered international if you're not from the European Union, Switzerland, or any country in the UK. So as a Canadian, I'm an international student for them, and so yeah, there's a bunch of schools that I can't apply to that I wish I could, and they're also, half of them take an exam similar to the MCAT, half of them take the UCAT, so it's just a very complicated process. I was applying at Newcastle University this year via their application service called the UCAS. Again, I can link all those in the description box. And so yeah, for the UK, I just searched up like UK medical schools and UK medical school requirements for Canadians, and just after a quick few Google searches, found a list of the schools that I wanted to apply to, looked at where I was eligible without having graduated first, and then Newcastle had 2 programs. One's a 4-year, one's a 5-year, and those just seemed the best fit for me personally. And so that's why I just chose to apply there. And another quick note on Australia, a bunch of the schools do need you to either be in high school when you apply, or to have graduated from university when you apply, just because that's how their program structure is. So there's that to keep in mind if you do want to pursue this pathway of medicine or going into medicine. And the other biggest thing to concern is, or to keep in mind, is the financial burden, because going abroad for just anything, especially professional school, is a very big task financially. So that's something I like to think about at times, but in my mind and just the way I see things, money is something that comes and goes around. However, your time spent doing certain things and your time spent chasing the goals and dreams that you have, that doesn't come back. So in reality, yes, if I do get into either of these schools and I do finish all my schooling, I will be in a very large amount of debt. But at the same time, I'll still be a doctor. Ideally, I'll get to be a surgeon, and ideally, I'll get to provide care to people who need it. And at the end of the day, that's more important to me than what's on my paycheck or how much money I owe to the bank, because I can pay that off eventually, but I'd rather pay it off being a doctor than not have that debt but then not be a doctor. But again, that's just my take. Obviously, if you have different views, then that's completely okay. But yeah, I'd say if you're looking at this pathway, that's definitely something to consider. And yeah, I guess that just wraps up the video, because that's everything I've had to say for now. I've also got to get back to studying for the UCAT. So yeah, if you like this video, then please feel to drop it a like. Subscribe for more content like this, and if you've got any comments or suggestions for me, because I'm still new to editing and everything, just drop them in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
One eternity later.